Welcome back to the RobCo podcast, and today we have a special episode where we actually interview Clemens about his upcoming in the world of engineering and what he's done in the past. And we really want to dive deep into who Clemens is and what he's done, what his path has been, and his place at RobCo right now. What is that all about? And how it is to be at RobCo and how to work at RobCo and what makes it so special. So welcome, Clemens. And please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what it means to be a principal engineer at RobCo.
Well, first of all, I'm probably the oldest engineer. So that's one thing that it means. I have a history with AI because before it was called AI or before you were able to call it AI, I was working for US West Coast companies like Microsoft. I was working on the ride-sharing space. I was working on autonomous driving for a couple of years, always out of Munich.
Oh, right.
And so RobCo came about and gave me that opportunity to work in the headquarters of a company that kind of works like a Silicon Valley startup.
Cool. What got you interested into this space? Like looking at your school years, what got you interested in the space of technology?
I've been a computer kid ever since computers came into my vicinity. So my brother got a Commodore 64 when I was 10 years old, and since then I was hooked. Got to the point where after finishing school, I thought, this is all too boring. I don't want to study computer science now. And so then I did a little detour and then came back and said, okay, that's probably the only thing that I'm able to do.
So interesting. Did you ever use like Atari, or what was your path through the different computers?
First Commodore, as I said, and then Amiga. The classical 80s and 90s career in that sense, and at some point then PCs. And
how did you go through the 2000s when there was the big .com bubble, or at least the big internet shift? Did you what was your first touch point with the internet?
My first touch point was at TUM, at the Munich Technical University, where they had an open door day. And so I was able to get there. It was fall of 95. And I typed in an address like yahoo.com, and it downloaded stuff from the United States. And I was just completely thrilled by that.
I mean, that is such a crazy technology shift, right? And it's not that long ago. We're talking about 30 years now. 30 years of internet, of working internet, let's put it that way. So that is really interesting. So you studied at TUM, Technische University of Munich. What was the field you studied in?
Actually, I was at the LMU.
Oh, okay.
So I shifted a bit after, that was before I finished school. I eventually studied computational linguistics.
Okay.
And did a PhD there while already working as a software engineer.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm at the core was always I'm self-taught in everything I'm doing, and so kind of took a while. It was a kind of a non-linear career path, but with the PhD, eventually I settled on what I would be doing.
How did you figure out what to do after school? Because I think, as you're talking about a non-linear path, I think that is a good thing as well, because figuring it out is the hardest part, right? After school, especially in Germany, right, just picking something and going into studies is easy, or not easy, but it's fast, and then it can be the wrong path. So tell me a bit about your thought process that went into it, and tell me a bit about the non-linear path, because I think it's really interesting to really figuring out what you're passionate about.
Right. So here's the complicated part. So I think I was always talented in that space, but it was not cool back then.
Okay.
Right. It was before, people like Mark Zuckerberg, come out of the gym every other day and so on. So it was more like a very fringy, geeky, nerdy space. And I didn't really want to be part of that.
Okay.
And so I was actually looking for ways, where are fields where there are more girls and where you can have more fun. I had this other interest in the media industry, so I looked around in that space a little bit. And eventually, you have to make a choice whether you want to be mediocre in a field that interests you, or if you want to be really good in a place where you have the talent. And so eventually it kind of went back to that, and that's, when you're successful, then you also start to have fun in the space and the career and so on.
No, that makes absolute sense, and it's interesting. I said the word passion before, and I think that it does make sense that you like the stuff you're working on, but I think passion has been misused a lot in the past, and I think that talent, when you recognize you have talent in something, you can work in that space, and then it becomes a lot of fun as soon as you have that success, as you just said. So I think it's always a mixture of both having, this because sometimes you just have talents for technical stuff, and otherwise you have talents for creative stuff, and sometimes those are even mixed. So it's really interesting to see that. And then you studied at LMU first, linguistics, the computer linguistics. How was that? I mean, that must have been a crazy topic, right?
Yeah, so I came to it through the topic of search engines.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, search engines were a huge thing. It was a time when Google came about, and search engines before were like pretty useless. Like you could find a million documents, but the ones that are relevant didn't come up. And that's, at its core, it's a language understanding problem. It's obviously also has to do with clicks and all of that these days. But the internet was young, so there wasn't really a lot of that data around. And then I got dragged into this whole area of language processing, not being a linguist myself, and pretty quickly came to machine learning for language processing, which was a growing field at the time. So this got me into the whole area of statistics and machine translation and all these kind of things.
I mean, basically, machine learning is the logical path before AI, artificial intelligence, and so that put you into a very early stage of understanding how that whole field works, right?
Early and late. I mean, language processing is one of the oldest fields of artificial intelligence, right? Since the 1950s, people have tried to build machine translation systems, for example, as like the primary task to solve. And they've been trying for decades. And so eventually, when I went to conferences, like in the early 2000s, there were like these 15 different tasks, and everybody was working on a tiny part of this problem, and all of that got solved over the past few years.
Yep.
So the whole field has just was completely revolutionized over the past few years, and now I think we're in the stage again where you can, with a good conscience, say, okay, we're in this age of AI.
Amazing. Then looking at your PhD, then you chose a PhD field. How did you choose that, and how did that happen?
Now I need to remember what I actually did there. So it's a long time. It's like several career switches ago. Yeah. I came from the area of search. And we were looking very deeply into semantics of text. So my PhD advisor was not a machine learning guy. He was coming from the logic field.
Yep.
He had written like seminal books about logic. And so for 5 years we were arguing because he asked me to do the PhD there. Like I didn't apply. If I had known how this whole thing works, I would have probably gone to maybe a different place. But so this way, I was arguing it has to be solved by statistics, by data-driven approaches, and he was arguing against it. I think eventually I was right. It's fair to say, but it was kind of healthy. I learned a lot about the whole logic field, and then eventually, finished the PhD and never touched logic again.
And did you, after creating your PhD, when did you go to Microsoft? Was that before, in between, or after?
That was around the time when I finished it. The company I was working for was acquired by Microsoft.
Ah, makes sense.
And so I said, "Oh shit, the topic I'm working on is in connection with the company I was working with. So now management changes, so I better get this out." So that, because priorities might shift and then I might have trouble and so on. So I finished it around 2008 and then switched teams, was then working on web search ranking for quite a while.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's also interesting. We'll find out soon enough, but how the switch came from web search to robotics, because it's also different. What is your next step then gewesen? What was your next step after Microsoft then?
Microsoft at some point divested a bit in web search ranking because it was felt that the big leaps had already been done, and it was Bing at that time, so it was kind of comparable to Google, and so it became a profit center. Our team looked around inside of the company for new topics. And that took like 1 or 2 years. I was working on some interesting projects around deep learning, computer vision, and also the mixture between computer vision and natural language processing, which was completely new back then. It was the first time that you could restrict both images and text to the same currency, which is just vectors. So now suddenly you could build things like image captioning models. And so I was very much hooked into that, but there wasn't really a field emerging where I could do that work, especially out of Munich. And so eventually I was contacted by a recruiter, and they said, hey, we're building an autonomous driving team in Munich. We have a core technology called simultaneous localization and mapping, which we're building a team around. Are you interested in being, working on ML in that field? So I got contacted. There's a bunch of people from Google came there, so that was really interesting. We're building a team in Munich, and it kind of fit. And so then I was working on autonomous driving.
How was that time working on autonomous driving? Because I think that field, I mean, obviously now we're also really advanced in that space. It feels at least like it, that we're close to self-driving cars, but that field must have been super futuristic as well.
It was very much peak hype back then. So there was this feeling that you could commercialize self-driving cars really soon. It turned out that it was actually in the end much more expensive than people thought. So,
but I think that's a huge thing. Maybe you can clear something up. I exactly agree with what you just said. I think it's not easy, but it must be not that expensive. Why is it so expensive?
It's always the long tail, right?
Okay.
So you can get 99% accuracy with everything that you're doing, but then there's the squirrel, going over the road, and then suddenly everybody breaks, and I think self-driving is pretty close to AI completeness. So you have to solve all of AI in order to make it work. Now we can make it work just by throwing in tons and tons and tons of data and really weird situations. So that's how we are working around that.
Okay.
And back then it was also still classical robotics. So I think if you look at the transition from rule-based, algorithm-based approaches to completely data-driven approaches, we had natural language processing making that switch in the past few years. We had computer vision making that switch in the mid-2010s. Robotics was a bit late, actually. So what people did was they would build algorithmic planners, which do some kind of optimization, and they try to optimize the path that you drive. But then a lot of stuff around it, special cases, were written in code.
Okay.
And so even also for us, when we started, it didn't have a lot of data, so a lot of code was written. And eventually you have a planner that has like 1.5 million lines of C++ code. And it becomes just unmaintainable, and you only covered like a tiny sliver of what reality is all about. And so eventually you need to make that switch, throw out all the code, and learn everything. And then eventually things get better. But it's kind of a hump because you first think that you're there, but then the bar is actually much higher than you think.
I agree. I finally understand. So it's basically not the car would work in 99.9% of the cases, and that's what everybody was able to achieve at a, let me say, pretty fast. But then the last 1% or 0.1%, which would kill the business, obviously. One big accident, in the press and media would definitely hurt the whole system, and obviously people would lose trust. And then that's where it gets so difficult and so long tail, as you just said, to finish that problem. And I also understand now, of course, AI can solve for unlimited issues at some point. So it will always have an answer if something happens in a very fast manner.
Yeah, so eventually you build what is called a data-driven organization. So you get into the business of making sure that you have sensors out there that can collect data, that you have a machine for filtering out non-interesting data, curation pieces where a human has to look at a certain data point, and then eventually turning that into models with good metrics that when you apply them in a new setting, that the metrics can give you a good prediction of how the model performs. And that's something that we did already in Bing very early on. It was the first search engine as an answer to Google, which was completely machine learning based. It had very good methodology for doing that. And so ever since, you get to a new problem in a completely different field, but you can apply the same techniques and methodologies.
Very interesting. So what happened after the autonomous driving?
So first of all, the autonomous driving was a pretty weird ride in the literal sense. It was a team that was bootstrapped and then went through an exponential growth curve from 0 to 300 people within like 12 to 18 months. And then there was a peak, and then from then on, it kind of lingered, and that one was looking for partners, didn't find a good industry partner, and eventually it got sold off to Toyota.
Oh, interesting.
And so that was like $415 million invested.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I again was in the position: do you now move to the US or UK, or do you find something in the company to work on? And the interesting problem that where there was a big need was building kind of the Google Maps of the company. Was Lyft is a ride-sharing company, is the main competitor of Uber.
Yeah.
And so they were paying a lot of money to Google for using their maps. But they had like 1 million cars on the road all the time, sending their position and their velocity to the servers every second.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting problem for somebody who does machine learning, because now you have a almost infinite data pipe, and now you want to make sense of it. And we were building models for doing the routing, for doing the traffic prediction, for showing the green and red and yellow on the map, and obviously you're very close to the business, because every routing decision, every ETA, the estimated time of arrival that you compute, has an impact on the business. Are you making a profit or not? So that was kind of job security. And after 3 years of going through this roller coaster, I was actually pretty happy to find a place where, there's not a lot of companies out there that do this, so you don't get competition from all sides. It is a very interesting problem. I finally get to know how these map applications work, and so that was pretty nice. And at some point, you think, okay, maybe now I know how it works. Now I helped the business quite a bit. What else is out there? And then I looked around, and eventually.
I love that you always look at you look at problems you want to solve, and you're not looking for, I would say, you're not looking for a job. You never mentioned any job. You always, or role. You always mentioned the problem that you thought was very interesting that you wanted to solve. I think that's also it's very interesting that you see the world like that. It's more, it's really inside of you that you want to solve problems, be in with futuristic problems as well, and be really ahead of the curve in these fields. I find that really fascinating, because that means it's an intrinsic motivation for you to advance the world and advance technology, obviously.
But I think the nice thing about our field of technology is that it's so relevant, and the demand is so high, and you can actually make money just by going out and trying to be useful. So that's, if I'm a screenwriter or like an opera singer, I mean, of course, that's just as good of a profession, but it's just much, much harder to make a living out of that. And so, I'm just kind of lucky in that sense.
You just mentioned something really interesting, and I think you had the decision several times in your career: stay in Munich a move to a different country, a different city, maybe even Silicon Valley itself. And my question is there: why did you stay in Munich? Why is Munich such a place for you where you wanted to stay?
In the end, it's humans around you, right? Also, of course, I think Munich is one of the best cities in the world to live. I speak the language, I even speak the dialect, so that lends itself. I think it's kind of a privilege to live where you've grown up.
Yeah.
But there was also things like my mother got very ill when I was just 20, 23.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a component of that as well. Then I had a girlfriend, then I had a wife. So there were always, these things were more important to me than just prioritizing a career.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually that was just for me kind of an easy decision. Optimize your job given these constraints.
Yeah.
And I think Munich is just if it was some other city, it would have been much, much harder, but Munich has the right environment, and I think that environment has gotten much better over the past years. It's a much more international city now than it was like 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely! I totally agree. I mean, I live in Munich as well. I think that, and I moved here 20 years ago, and I think Munich has changed from being a German city to being one of the most international cities I've been to in Germany. And obviously this helps because fantastic companies are here, right? So you mentioned Microsoft has a headquarter here. Google has a headquarter here. There's dozens of other international companies here. OpenAI just opened the headquarters here. And I think that makes it a very special, unique place where you can actually not only live a very amazing life because the nature is so nice, but also have unlimited career possibilities in an environment such as Germany.
Yeah, and just the environment, you have the mountains, you have very nice surroundings. You are in Italy in 2 hours.
That's true.
You can have your original Italian espresso there. You have an airport, which is one of the largest in Europe. You can get everywhere on vacation. You're in the middle of Europe, so you can get everywhere within Europe within like 1 or 2, at most 3 hours. So in that sense, we're just very, very privileged here.
I agree. So what was your step after, finding out how maps work and solving that problem with machine learning? What was your next step after that?
I was looking around, thinking about forming my own company. There was the time when ChatGPT came out. I was actually had a hobby around construction and architecture, which is something I got really, really interested in. And it's also a field where like productivity in that field has stalled, and I think that the outcome has gotten worse over the past decades. So I was really looking around for can I have an impact in that space and also make a living out of that. Kind of didn't really click, so I looked around for a year. And I think there are opportunities out there, but it just didn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
And so eventually, again, I got into contact with RobCo kind of coincidentally, and that somehow clicked immediately.
I mean, really puts together like your field of knowledge with machine learning, also, the whole vision topic, and then obviously, robots. I think that is a field where you can also move into the future with them, which is really interesting for you.
I think everything worked out. There's the headquarter here. It was already at the right size that it was professional, but also still small enough so that you have access to everybody. You can know everybody, and it has just a very interesting and challenging problem to solve, and it has a very good opportunities out there. I think being in robotics is the perfect time right now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Robotics is so hot. It's really interesting, and a lot of things can still be created in robotics. This leads me to my next question: how is it to work at RobCo?
I think, not unexpected. Very, very fast. Like one of the things I saw that how fast an idea is implemented. Like you come in and then, within a week, something goes from idea to, being actually part of the product. Obviously, with the additional challenge that in contrast to like a SaaS company, like a completely software-oriented company, you also have to move atoms.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a huge difference. And there, RobCo has this philosophy that we want to have everything under one roof. So we're creating the hardware, we're creating the software. We have a solutions team. We have a team that works with customers from the get-go, and then we don't rely a lot on external partners. We do it all in-house. And so I think this is just an extremely good way to learn every day, right? I can always sit in a meeting every week where we talk about challenging customer problems. I can go out to a customer site, when I want to, just look at, what's the actual problem out there. I think that sets RobCo apart.
Yeah, what's really cool about RobCo as well is, which I don't think many people know, is the headquarters is in the center of Munich, but also the production facility where the robots are created and produced, the actual hardware is produced, is in that office. So it's basically you walk from the coffee machine area, you walk past some desks, and then you're directly with the engineers who are actually building the robots for the customers and testing them. And I think that is very unique at this point in time, for sure, that you're so close with all the departments together. And I think it's also a success formula to achieve this velocity in creating the products.
Yeah, definitely. One thing which makes it really attractive, just the work environment. We don't have too much space, I have to say. This is one of the things that come with being in the city center. But we're right next to TU Munich. We're in a very vibrant street where you can choose among 15 different places to eat. If you're in the office, as you say, I mean, you just walk 10 meters and you're next to the production guy.
I've seen all the photos on your whiteboard. Who's working at RobCo, and I was there I think a year ago, and it was a lot of people already, but it was like half the whiteboard. Now the whiteboard is full. So how international is your team, and how big is the team right now?
So RobCo was started as a spin-off from the Technical University. So the students that came from there are local, and who founded the company. Meanwhile, I would say 90% of the resumes I see are international.
Nice.
Yeah.
And when you're looking for people, I mean, just we're sitting here in this podcast format, obviously, but if you could encourage some people to send in their applications, who would that be, and who would you invite to join RobCo?
I mean, we're hiring in the product development team on all fronts, from controls, hardware, software. But obviously, when we think about the innovation side, we're building this robot learning based team. It's both on the software and the hardware side. So we're evolving both, how you interact with the robot, but also how the robot is configured, how it looks like, what sensors it might have, and so we're kind of building this AI-first robot system.
Amazing. Is that something what applicants could, when they join RobCo, can expect that they will be working at something that is changing and sculpting the future and is really at the forefront of technology?
Absolutely. I mean, an AI-first robot is not something that you can see in the market right now. There is classical industry robotics, which has a slightly different focus, but is very well established, for many decades. But it's mostly, you can see it as a robot that is completely blind, and it just repeats something that it was programmed for a million times a day. And on the other hand, you have the humanoid space, which is really on the cutting edge of research, which just, in my view, in many areas solves slightly the wrong problem. And so what we're trying to take these two things and put them together and come up with something that is really, really useful, and where a customer of ours might say, hey, wow, this is something I'm willing to pay for because it's a real painkiller for my business problem.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that RobCo is really at a very interesting space and place right now in time as well. And tell me a bit more about your role, right? It's called the principal engineer. And tell me a bit more about like how does your day look like? What is your, what do you do, and what is your basically what is your role in the company?
Mm-hmm. So it's, I think, twofold. One is that I'm looking a little bit across the whole product engineering team and make sure that we're building the software mostly in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I'm coming in with these 20 years of experience, and I've seen a few things here and there. I want to make sure that we have a defined set of things that we want to build, that the communication inside of the team is done the right way, that things are written down and discussed and decided the right way. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that I bootstrapped the what we call the Autonomy team, which is our first venture into an innovation team after the company was founded. Right, so when you found a company, you have innovation. It came out of university, and you make it a business, and then you scale up the business. And so then the question is, what's next? And so we're looking into, okay, how can we build this next generation without going completely off the tracks with a pie in the sky R&D project. So kind of balancing that, building that team, building the culture, and then eventually merging that into the whole product development organization, and that's the challenge that I'm dealing with all the time right now.
Yeah, very interesting. So you're basically looking at all the departments and being in touch with everybody, and so really understanding where you can push the new products. What is, when we're talking about communication, what is the main communication language at RobCo?
It's all English.
It's all English.
Yeah. So I took that from a former manager of mine who was German but lived in the States a lot. He was even doing the one-on-ones in English, even if we were just talking, simply because he said, you just have to have this muscle memory.
Makes sense.
And make sure that you don't switch all the time. I think that's a really bad sign because you always exclude somebody who might not be as perfect in German.
No, that makes absolute sense. And then obviously the words, sometimes when you've been talking in German too much, words will not come up in your mind in English, and that will hinder the conversation. Whereas the other way around, will always be in the English mode, and it's easier to communicate. But this makes RobCo really inclusive as well, right? If you're coming in from, I don't know, some other field, some other country, some other language, and you're good at English, you can, directly be with RobCo and start communicating and be inside and just start.
Yes, absolutely.
That's really cool. I like that. Thank you for answering my questions, because I think it's really interesting for everybody out there also to understand who you are, but also to understand how RobCo works and how the company actually functions and what kind of team members are there and also are invited to join RobCo. I have some quick questions now for you, which we'll do, and they're called the rapid fire questions. And they're also really interesting because they are like just fast questions, some fun ones, and you can just answer them like within 10, 15 seconds, 1 or 2 sentences, something like that. All right. Coffee or energy drinks? How many per day?
Absolutely coffee. At least twice a day. I don't start a day without a good cappuccino, and usually at the end of a long walk.
Where do you get your good cappuccino from? That's an extra question that I just thought of.
Last one I bought in Garmisch. There's a local roaster there, which I can recommend.
Okay, very good. Very good. Early bird engineer or late night problem solver? What's your...
It used to be late night problem solver. Now when I do that, I can't sleep. So I shifted to being more like the early bird, or
Nice.
kind of in the middle.
Also good, right?
in the transition.
Yeah, transition is from late to early.
I have to say, robotics engineers are surprisingly often early birds.
Interesting.
I don't know why.
Interesting. Slack messages or walking over to someone's desk?
Both is fine. Both has different pros and cons.
Interesting, yeah. First thought on your very first day at RobCo?
have to remember. Great team.
That's cool.
Mm.
Office, remote, or hybrid? What actually works best?
I worked remotely for 5 years. That works great, especially when everybody is remote. I think what doesn't work is if somebody is remote and the others are in an office.
Yeah, that's also the exclusion point you mentioned. Well, how does RobCo handle the? Obviously the engineers who are building the machines, they have to be on site. But how's it solved for the other employees?
We have people who are remote and hybrid. Depends on the role, of course. When you deal with the robots, obviously often you have to be on site. I would say, I'm definitely much less working from home than I used to. But we're very flexible in that regard. Like for my role, particularly, I'm mostly in the office. But sometimes 1 or 2 days at home is also fine.
Something that I find really cool at RobCo is when I come into the RobCo office, I do have this immediate feeling of culture, of community, and people really being there and using the space to work, but also using it as a space for meeting each other. Not just for meetings, but meeting each other. So I always have this sense when I walk through the RobCo office that there's people gathering, talking about the stuff that they're working on, exchanging ideas, but also talking about just being there and enjoying having an office and being inspired by others, which I think is often when you're doing a hybrid or remote setup, is really hard to get by. And the culture really feels really good. Like everybody smiles, everybody's happy. The people are. We come into the office, nobody knows us, right? And then it's like, hey, how are you doing? And everything. I like that feeling. So that's just my take on how I feel.
To be honest, I think many people there would do their job as a hobby as well. Yeah, it's such a cool area to work in.
That's so good. Music while coding, productivity booster or distraction?
Productivity booster, but I prefer actually podcasts or some kind of text. I don't know why. My ADHD brain can deal with that.
Interesting. That's very interesting because that would usually be more of a distraction, right?
Yeah.
Then you have a very...
if music, then blues.
Interesting.
I had to find out about that.
How much of your week is real engineering versus meetings?
Shifted a lot over the past few weeks and months. When I bootstrapped the team, was mostly engineering. I was very much still in IC until October, November. Now it's all about building the team. So more meetings, more coordination. But that's different for the other people in the team, of course. I think there's plenty of time to really do your work still.
Nice. Average number of browser tabs open right now on your browser?
Usually about 30 to 40 over the course of the day, and then I'm trying to trim it down.
Okay. How often does a robot or model work on the first try?
Never.
Okay. Explain why that can never happen.
Because it's atoms. Atoms is reality, and previously you have a concept in your head. It's virtual. It's an idea space. So I think that's why really being where the rubber meets the road, where things get real, is so important. Even if you build a robot in your lab environment and you put them in a factory, different environment, different kind of challenges.
Yeah. How closely do software and hardware teams collaborate?
Very closely. They sit next to each other.
Amazing. Are you more in prototyping mode or optimization mode?
The team is in both, like the whole product development team. We have very mature parts of the software which work out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, what I'm doing right now is very much prototyping. Like we use the scientific method for finding out how things work, making sure that we have a very, as efficient way as possible to try to find out what questions we want to answer. But it's definitely prototyping mode.
How much time do engineers realistically get to learn new technologies?
As much as it takes. We're as I said, we're still relatively focused. Like we wouldn't go completely on a sidetrack just because something is cool. But then within our domain, everything is new, right? There, as I said, it's an innovation field. There is no market. There is no proven concepts. Everybody in the industry that is working on it is trying to figure it out, and that's what we're doing as well.
Well, who decides on the tech stack? Engineers or management?
Oh, absolutely, engineers. They have to figure it out.
When was the last time you thought, oh, that's a really smart solution?
I think it almost every day. Like, people are smarter than me, so I get to see new ideas coming up all the time.
Amazing. Failure culture. Do you have fast experiments or careful validation?
Fast experiments. I think we need to have the safety, that people can make, or it's not even a mistake. I think a failed experiment is something that you learn from. So what we're trying to extract is bits per time unit.
And can engineers push their own ideas beyond the roadmap?
Absolutely. I mean, they're also part of building the roadmap for the most part. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. How early are engineers involved in the product decisions?
They're part of the whole conversation all the time. We have a product management, which bridges the gap between customers and product engineering. There is obviously, meanwhile, some structure. Then, like, there's a leads level, and you get to discuss these things on that level as well. But then, engineers are involved at every point in the process.
And how often do features come directly from engineers' ideas? Or is it like, how is that driven?
Same thing. I mean, it's just input from different sides.
Cool. Do you see the impact of your work quickly or much later?
As I said, very quickly, the turnaround time in the company is extremely short.
Nice. Cool. Who would not be happy working at RobCo?
Well, I think if you're grown up in a very corporate culture with long processes and timelines, very heavy engineering, then RobCo is probably not the right place. We are still at a phase where we're trying to be very nimble and make do with very quick decisions, prototypes, and really focus on delivery and speed.
Yeah, what does someone need to bring to really thrive at RobCo?
I think really the energy to get things on the road.
Okay. And what surprises new hires the most at RobCo?
What surprises people the most? I would say the level of competence, given that it's such a young team. For many people, it's the first job after college. And if you work there for 2 years, I mean, they have seen all the different pieces of a robotic system.
I can only give some advice here to all the listeners and some feedback to you as well. I started after university working at a startup as well. And it was one of the most formative years in my life because I got to touch everything. I got to see everything. I was so close to management. I got to learn from them stuff that I would now never learn, like due diligence stuff even. And I think it's, for young people, it's the best time you can ever choose to go in such a company because you'll be able to form a different kind of connection with people and see so much and learn so much faster. I would say 5 times to 10 times the speed than you could in a big corporate or something like that, where you're only allowed to touch your small space. So I think, that is something I can absolutely relate to.
Yeah, I mean, there's less structure, but in a big corporation, it feels a little bit like throwing pebbles at an elephant, right? You're not really able to influence the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And that's different here.
How is performance measured at RobCo?
We have a defined HR process where there's a 360-degree review a few times a year, but it's not a lot of ceremony, I have to say, compared to big companies that might spend weeks in calibration meetings and so on. The ceremony is very, very much trimmed down.
Nice. Now to finish up, 2 more questions. Describe RobCo as an employer in 3 words.
rebuild the robot market.
That works. And last question. Would you recommend RobCo to a friend looking for an engineering role?
Of course, I would.
Well, that makes absolute sense. Clemens, thank you so much for taking the time and really explaining a bit more about your role and really going deep into all these questions I just asked and explaining how your path was. I think it's really interesting for everybody who watches to find a matching between RobCo and themselves and understand more why RobCo is such a driven company. And also, it's not just about making robots, it's about, creating the future. And I think you explained that really well and, how driven you are to make that happen. So thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for watching our podcast episode. And obviously, if you liked what you just saw, please like and subscribe and obviously recommend this podcast also to your friends. And if you know somebody who is an engineer and would like to join an amazing team, well, then definitely also let them know that RobCo is hiring. And maybe that person will be the next, new hire at RobCo. So thank you for watching and see you next time when we're back in RobCo's podcast.